Today, we're digging into a paradox that just about defies logic. You've got a country sitting on more oil than Saudi Arabia, yet its people have faced empty shelves, worthless money, and a truly historic crisis. So how is that even possible? Well, this is the story of Venezuela.
Right, that's the big question, isn't it? How on earth did the country with the most oil just collapse? It's a question that gets right to the very heart of wealth, power, and politics. And believe me, the answer isn't simple. It's a story that unfolds over centuries.
And what a story it is. Just look at this. It shows the jarring contrast perfectly. On one side, you have the golden age of the 1970s, a time of incredible wealth, shiny modern cities, and a strong currency. And on the other, the crisis of today, defined by hyperinflation and crippling shortages. It's a classic boom and bust story, but just on an absolutely epic scale.
To really understand how we got here, we have to go back, way back. Our journey begins with the country's origins, before the oil, before the revolution, when Venezuela was being forged in the fires of colonialism and a desperate fight for freedom.
So for nearly 300 years, Venezuela was a Spanish colony. But by the early 1800s, revolutionary ideas were in the air, and a fight for freedom kicked off. And a figurehead emerged, the famous Simón Bolívar. He led the charge, declaring independence in 1811 and finally sealing the deal about a decade later. Now, Bolívar's grand dream of a united South America, well, it didn't last. The new nation was left to figure out its own identity, and it faced a long, rocky period of instability and military strongmen.
Okay, let's jump to the event that would completely redefine Venezuela's destiny in the 20th century. I'm talking about the discovery of oil. It was both a blessing that brought unbelievable wealth and a curse that would create a fatal dependency.
And listen, when oil was discovered, this change wasn't gradual. It was explosive, like an economic big bang. This black gold erupting from under Venezuelan soil didn't just alter the country's path. It basically launched it onto the world stage, and it happened almost overnight.
And this really captures the sheer scale of that golden age. By the mid-20th century, Venezuela wasn't just another oil producer. It was a global superpower in the industry. The capital, Caracas, became this glittering modern metropolis, a real beacon of prosperity in South America. And the oil money, as you can see, it flowed into everything: new roads, schools, hospitals. For a whole generation, it really truly seemed like the boom would never end.
But here's the catch, and it's a huge one. All this incredible prosperity was built on a single pillar. With every bit of focus on oil, other essential parts of the economy, like agriculture and local industry, they were just left to wither. The nation's entire fate was tied to the price of one single thing. So this deep economic vulnerability, combined with simmering social tensions, it really set the stage for the next dramatic chapter: the rise of Hugo Chavez and his radical political pivot.
You see, while Venezuela was technically a democracy from 1958, that wasn't the whole story. For many people, that immense oil wealth just wasn't trickling down. The reality was deep, grinding inequality and corruption everywhere you looked. All that anger finally boiled over in 1989 with the violent Caracaso riots. The system was clearly broken, and the country was just primed for a charismatic leader promising to tear it all down.
And that leader was Hugo Chavez. He was elected in 1998, and he launched what he called the Bolivarian Revolution. The core idea was actually pretty simple: take the country's massive oil profits and pour them into ambitious social programs for the poor, all while tightening the state's grip over the entire economy. And you can really see the two sides of the coin from his era here. On one hand, absolutely, millions were lifted out of poverty through huge investments in healthcare, education, and housing. For a lot of people, life genuinely got better. But on the other hand, Chavez centralized power. He weakened democratic institutions, and he nationalized huge chunks of the economy. The whole system could only work as long as oil prices were sky high.
After Chavez's death in 2013, his hand-picked successor Nicolas Maduro took power, and almost immediately, the perfect storm hit.
So let's just walk through this recipe for disaster. First, the foundation just crumbled. Global oil prices crashed, which slashed the state's only real source of income. Then, the engine seized up. Years of mismanagement and neglect crippled the state oil company, PDVSA. At the exact same time, massive corruption was draining what little reserves were left. And the final blow? Crippling international sanctions that basically choked off whatever economic life was left.
The result was an economic catastrophe. To put it in perspective, just try to wrap your head around this number.
In 2016 alone, consumer prices shot up by 800%. It was the beginning of a hyperinflationary spiral that would make salaries completely worthless and destroy people's life savings overnight.
So as the economy was imploding, the political system completely fractured. This led to a deep and paralyzing battle for the very legitimacy of the government itself.
The political system just shattered. Maduro's elections were widely condemned as fraudulent, and then he stripped the opposition-controlled legislature of its power. So, in this really dramatic move, the head of that legislature, Juan Guaidó, he invoked the Constitution and declared himself the legitimate interim president. Dozens of countries, including the U.S., recognized him, which created this bizarre and totally paralyzing situation. Two men, both claiming to be the rightful leader of Venezuela.
So where does all of that leave Venezuela today? Well, amidst the ruins of this crisis, the story isn't over. In fact, we're seeing these surprising signs of adaptation and a remarkable, if very painful, resilience. And that's the crucial thing to remember here, the human toll. Over the past decade, millions of Venezuelans have fled their homes, creating one of the largest refugee crises in the world. It's a story of families being torn apart, of doctors and engineers driving taxis in foreign countries. But it's also a story of just incredible strength in the face of unbelievable adversity.
And, amidst all the hardship, some fragile signs of life have started to emerge. With the local currency basically worthless, people just started using US dollars for everything. This unofficial dollarization has helped tame some of the chaos of hyperinflation. At the same time, a partial easing of sanctions has allowed oil production to slowly, cautiously tick upward again.
I think this quote just nails the essence of the entire Venezuelan paradox. You can have all the resources in the world, but they mean very little without strong, transparent institutions. And when political ideology trumps sound economics, it's always the people who ultimately pay the price.
Which brings us right to our final, lingering question. Venezuela is at another major crossroads. Can it finally learn from its past and use that incredible oil wealth to build a diversified, stable, and prosperous future? Or is it simply destined to repeat the same painful cycles all over again?